When you hear the words Spanish Inquisition, what comes to mind? Probably a powerful, single-minded institution of pure Catholic authority, right? A machine built to crush heresy. But what if that simple story of a clash of civilizations is missing a huge piece of the puzzle? A piece that's way more complex, and frankly, way more ironic.
See, underneath all that persecution, there's this hidden story of dependence. And that brings us to the central question we're digging into today, and it's a wild one. How could the Inquisition, an organization whose whole mission was to erase Islamic influence, be secretly relying on its laws, its buildings, and even its science to function?
Our story starts not with flames and torture chambers, but with something a lot less dramatic: paperwork. Because if you look closely, the very DNA of the Inquisition's bureaucracy has this quiet Islamic heritage, a kind of structural echo that, once you see it, you just can't unsee.
Okay, check this out. On one side, you have the Islamic judicial system. You've got the Qadi, who's the judge, and he's advised by a mufti, a top-tier expert on religious law. Now look at the Inquisition. It's almost a carbon copy. You've got the Inquisitor, who acts as the judge, and he's advised by theological experts, called calificadores, who decide what is and isn't heresy. This is no accident. This was a proven, efficient model for policing faith that the new rulers they adopted it for their own purposes. And this influence went deep. Right to the core. The brain trust of 16th century Spain was Salamanca University. It's where all the future inquisitors were getting their education. And what do you think they were studying? Legal ideas about property and war that were heavily shaped by the Maliki school of Islamic law, passed down through the brilliant minds of Al-Andalus.
And believe me, this relationship wasn't just some dusty academic thing. We are talking about cold, hard cash. In 1526, Morisco leaders in Valencia cut a deal, a secret one, called the Concordia. They paid 50,000 ducats, a staggering amount of money back then, to basically buy a 40-year pass from being prosecuted by the Inquisition. It just goes to show you, for all its ideological fire, the Inquisition was very aware of the economic and legal power of the community it was trying to stamp out.
So this connection, it wasn't just in their heads or in their books. It was literally built into the world around them. The Inquisition didn't just borrow ideas, it moved in. It conquered and occupied the physical spaces of the culture it defeated.
And if you want the perfect symbol for this whole story, look no further than the incredible Aljaferia Palace in Zaragoza. This place was a jewel of 11th century Islamic civilization. After the Reconquista, it became the regional headquarters for the Inquisition. The message here was brutal, and it was totally deliberate. The very heart of Islamic power would now house the machine of its destruction.
And they didn't just move in. Oh no, they renovated. The Catholic monarchs literally built a new floor right on top of the Islamic palace. And those beautiful prayer rooms and mosques on the ground floor? Yeah, those became interrogation cells and torture chambers. Meanwhile, the inquisitors set up their offices on the floor above. It was a strategy, plain and simple, to physically imprison an entire culture within its own magnificent walls.
But honestly, the most shocking connection, the most personal and paradoxical link of them all, wasn't in law books or in architecture. It was in the human body. It was in the world of medicine, where the Inquisition's own survival actually depended on Islamic science. To get this, you have to know about one person, Ibn Sina, or as he was known in the West, Avicenna. They called him the Prince of Medicine, and that's not an exaggeration. For hundreds of years in European medical schools, his word was basically law. His incredible work, The Canon of Medicine, wasn't just a textbook, it was the textbook for medicine all across Europe. The elite, highly educated inquisitors, you better believe they learned their understanding of health, the human body, and anatomy from this exact book.
So here's where the irony gets almost too hard to believe. When a high-ranking inquisitor or a member of the royal family got sick, who did they call? More often than not, a Morisco physician. Yep. Even though they were seen as ideologically impure, their hands-on surgical skills were seen as far superior to the university doctors. They were, quite simply, indispensable.
But hold on, because there is a much, much darker side to this story. That very same Islamic medical knowledge that was saving the inquisitors' lives, it was also being weaponized to perfect their cruelty down in the torture chamber.
And the evidence for this is just chilling. We have records showing the Inquisition in Valencia actually appointing Moriscos as familiars, or lay officials, partly just to make sure they always had access to their medical help. But even worse,
Inquisitors used the sophisticated knowledge from Ibn Sinai's canon to understand the precise limits of the human body, how much agony a person could take before they died. They were using Islamic science to fine-tune torture, to make sure they could get a confession without the victim dying on them.
But you have to remember, the Muslim community in Spain was not just a passive victim here, not at all. Faced with this unbelievable pressure, they fought back. They developed this brilliant intellectual resistance, using the very tools of their own legal tradition to survive.
They couldn't fight with swords and armor, so they fought with ideas. Islamic scholars created what you could call a kind of juridical counterintelligence. And the most famous example of this is the Arun Fatwa from 1504. Think of it as a secret survival guide for how to be a Muslim under the all-seeing eye of the Inquisition.
And the advice in this guide was incredibly clever and practical. It was like a spy manual for faith. It taught people how to do their ritual prayers using only tiny, subtle body movements that no one would notice. It told them how to perform their ritual washings by just pretending they were bathing. And if they were forced to eat pork or drink wine, it said to reject it internally, in your heart, to keep your faith pure when your actions couldn't be.
So, when you put all this together, what do you get? You have the Spanish Inquisition, an institution whose entire reason for being was to destroy a culture, but it ended up absorbing its legal system, living in its palaces, and becoming deeply, disturbingly dependent on its science, both for healing its own people and for hurting its victims.
This whole hidden history just shows that cultures don't simply disappear. They leave behind echoes, imprints, and sometimes they become a fundamental part of the very thing that tried to erase them. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? In the long, complicated story of history, is any victory, or any defeat, ever really absolute?